Hello, welcome back to Plant Revelations, and today I'm going to talk to you about 3 different bulbs that you can plant between October and December. We're going to look at what to look for when you're buying them, how to store them, and how to plant them correctly so you get long-term success, not just for next year but for many years to come. This time of year, people think about putting the garden to bed and tidying up, but really we should be thinking about planting. It's one of the biggest planting seasons. And bulbs are one of the cheapest and most instant way to get colour in the garden. I can't think of any other plant that you can plant in the autumn and then the following year you can have a dramatic display, even in year 1. But if you do plant them correctly, then they will go on year after year. So what do you look for when you're looking for a bulb? This is a daffodil or narcissus. Looks rather like an onion, and when you go to pick them, whatever bulb it is, it should be hard, very firm, and ideally not shooting too much, and ideally it hasn't got lots of roots coming out. If it's soft and squidgy, it's rotten. If it's soft and feels almost hollow and breaks when you push it hard, then it's also no good. So avoid those at all costs. Have a rifle through the bags, because they normally come in plastic bags, and give them a good squeeze. Normally if they've been in the shop too long, they're no good. But this time of year is a great time of year because they're often on offer, because the garden centres and supermarkets want to get rid of them so they can get all the Halloween and Christmas stuff in. You don't have to plant them straight away. You can store them in a really nice cool shed. Don't bring them inside the house because the central heating will desiccate them. So a cool shed or a cool conservatory, ideally in the dark though, porch maybe, garage, away from any rats or squirrels that might eat your bulbs. There's 3 different types of bulbs I want to talk about today, which are fantastic for the garden. One we've already looked into a little bit, that's the narcissus or daffodil. So what's the difference? There is no difference. Narcissus is a Latin name for daffodil, and they come in all different sizes. The dwarf ones tend to flower earlier, and the larger ones tend to flower later, but that's not always true. There's varieties that will flower in December, like Regivold's Early Sensation. There's Spring Dawn that will flower in January, but majority will flower around about Easter time, anywhere between March and April. Now, I always think of daffodils as like the alcoholic you invite to the party. They're fun at first, but then later on it gets very messy and they're hard to get rid of. So I wouldn't advise putting big daffodils in a border. I'd always go for small ones, because once they've finished flowering, the leaves will hang around. You can't really chop the leaves down for like 6 or 7 weeks, and they just look a mess. So these I normally plant in the grass, in like a meadow type situation, unless they're dwarf daffodils, and then you can get away with it. The dying leaves are often covered up by herbaceous perennials that are growing up shortly afterwards. The next thing, which normally flowers after narcissus or daffodils, are tulips. The great thing about tulips is they're a bit more of a diva that comes to the party. They turn up late and they leave early, and they look great. Their leaves almost die back as soon as they've finished flowering. And finally, we've got the alliums, which look very different. Member of the onion family, so please don't let your dogs eat these. Or once they're in the ground, they tend to leave them alone, but obviously they look like a ball if you chuck them around. Onions and garlic are pretty poisonous to dogs, but these are probably the perfect guest to the party, because the leaves will come up really early in the season, and by the time they're flowering, the leaves have already died back. This is one called Purple Sensation. It's a really good, reliable one. It will self-seed, it will spread, very easy. There's also Christophii, which I like to grow, which has flowers the size of a football, but it only gets to knee height. Or there's some absolute whoppers, and the bulbs are about this big. But they're quite expensive. They're about £1 or £2. Generally expect to pay between £3 and £6 for 10 of these bulbs, depending on what variety they are, if it's a scarce variety or not. Never buy bluebells, or fritillarias or snowdrops as bulbs, because they like wet, damp conditions. They often will not come up very well. You'll get a poor success rate. You can buy those in the green, which basically with their leaves on, in bunches, in January, February time, even March time. And you can get them pretty cheap as well. They might work out more expensive than if you buy them in a packet, but you probably get 100% success rate. Whereas if you buy a packet of snowdrops, and then even if they don't look like they've dried out, you may only get 50% that come through. So the first method I want to talk about is naturalising bulbs in grass. So we're planting bulbs essentially in a lawn or a meadow. This area is full of wildflowers in the summer. And we want it to look natural. So we're not going to plant clumps. There's 25 bulbs here, which isn't that many actually. I'll probably go for more like 100 or 50 here. Always go for more than less. And I'm just chucking them randomly. It's roughly an oval shape here. And this is a bulb called Pubello, Narcissus Pubello. It's a creamy white narcissus, multi-headed, only gets about sort of 30 to 40 centimetres tall, so it's quite a small one. So we just spread them out evenly, we chuck them so it's a bit more random, and we're just going to plant them where they fall. And that way it looks as if they've self-seeded. The next thing you'll need is one of these. It's called a rabbitting spade. I don't want to even go into what they're really used for, but they are fantastic for planting bulbs. Looks a bit similar to a fence spade, fence post spade, but it's just that little bit shorter. And we're going to aim to plant these as deep as we can. Now, as a general rule with bulbs, plant them at least 3 times the depth of the bulb. But with these larger dafts, and with the tulips and the alliums, we can go really deep. So what you want to do is literally something called slit planting. We get the spade in as deep as possible, push it back, push it forth, and then you've got a bit of a slit, and we can just push the bulb down as deep as we can. That's really deep, and then we just press the hole back in. Job done. And what I'll do is I'll put 1 in some holes and 2 in another to make it look more random as well. And that way each bulb has got space to eventually, in 3 or 4 years time, each bulb will form its own clump. Whereas if we were to plant them as one clump, they would just very quickly stop flowering as they get too congested. So the next method is the hole method. And it's really quite simple. You dig a hole, virtually got your bulbs in shoulder to shoulder in the hole. And this is a very old-fashioned way of planting bulbs, and I would not recommend it at all for long-term success. It's fine if you want to do bedding, or it's fine in a pot, for example. You can get the bulbs virtually touching each other, and then you can even put 2 or 3 inches of soil on top and then do another layer. This isn't great because it's not a method that you can do in between the plants in the garden. The bulbs will eventually propagate themselves by producing lots of little baby bulbs. Each one of those will get as big as this, and before you know it, the hole is full of lots of small bulbs, and they haven't got enough room to grow big enough to flower in size. So you just end up with basically a load of leaves that come up with no flowers. So it's really not a good method for long-term success. Also, it's quite hard work. You have to dig a big hole to put in 5 or 6 in there, and then you have to go and dig another big hole somewhere else. Much easier to slit plant, which I'll show you now. The border method I like to use is very similar to what we did with the meadow, and that's to slit plant. Now, tulips and alliums can be planted as deep as 12 inches. So why do we plant them so deep? You can go up to 12 inches deep, But usually you're only going to get it about, with one of these, you're only going to get it about 6 or 7 inches deep. And that's because each year, as your tulip grows, it'll push itself up more and more. So if you went for the recommended 3 times the depth, within 2 years, they're on the surface, they're falling over when they're flowering, you accidentally dig them up when you're weeding. Generally, it's just a pain. And the slip planting method is great because you can plant, you don't have to dig up your perennials to plant your bulbs underneath. You can literally just slam your spade in right near a perennial, as long as it's a deciduous one. In some cases, I've gone right through an actual perennial, like a drift of perennials, and planted bulbs in the middle of them. And then you just pop your tulip in as deep as you can. And that's it, it's as simple as that. Another thing to remember is always plant them pointy side upwards. So that's where the shoot will come and the roots will come from the base. It's a bit different with alliums, they're a bit trickier because they're more of a round shape. I'll show you a close-up. They have a bobbly bit at the bottom where the roots come out of, and the point is much flatter, so it's harder to differentiate. The reason we do that is because it can take a lot of energy for the bulb to right itself. If worst case to worst, you accidentally plant one upside down, it will most likely shoot round and come back up again, but that's using lots of energy, and you want the plant to be putting the energy into flowers, and it might mean that next year it's too exhausted to produce flowers again. So plant it the right way up. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, please like and subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next one comes out. Thanks for watching. Ciao, ciao for now.